One of the things that I've learned now in my AI journey, particularly with enterprises, is they're concerned about the validity of your model, but they're more concerned about how you're monitoring that model. The oversight is much more important from a regulatory standpoint than the model validation. It can help with the hallucinations, with the accuracy, with the biases.
And making sure people don't jump off of the Golden
State
State
Bridge.
Bridge.
Making sure you don't get the responses like jumping off of the Golden State Bridge is a good thing, right?
Yeah, I saw that one this morning. I was like, oh boy, Google, you're in trouble. Well, hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. Today we are going to be meeting with a dear friend of mine, Michael Arulfo. Michael, can you tell us who you are and what you do and why you're here?
Sure. Thanks, Caroline. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be a guest on your show. My name is Michael Arulfo. I am the Generative AI Principal Enterprise Architect at Boston Scientific. And I'm also the chairman of BETA, which is the largest and oldest tech accelerator in Minnesota. So I have two viewpoints and two experiences when it comes to AI. One is the large enterprise viewpoint, which is what I do during the daytime in my role with Boston Scientific, leading the generative AI architecture strategy for the company. So that's the enterprise, large company view. And then the other one is the more ground level tech startup founder view of AI, which is coming from a different perspective, a different community, and that's represented really well with my interaction and my role as chairman of BETA. So I engage with founders almost on a daily basis.
Well, fantastic. I think the first thing I want to ask you about, especially since your day job is working in the enterprise space,
yes, absolutely,
is talking about like what are the largest opportunities when it comes to AI in the enterprise space, and what are you thinking about when you are at work at Boston Scientific or thinking about the healthcare space specifically?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I think it's helpful to talk about when we're talking about enterprise. Especially enterprise AI, to have the broadest perspective as possible, right? So not just, Boston Scientific, second largest medical device company in the world, but most people don't even understand or know that, what is the medical device industry all about, right? So that is too focused, and and especially with the dynamic nature of AI these days, I think it's more helpful to see it in the larger context, but still applicable and in a way that's relatable to folks. So when I am asked about what's the broad industry, perspective as an enterprise architect, I like to talk about the trends that I'm seeing in the healthcare industry around AI as a whole. Then you get the broadest perspective, but you also get the context so people can relate to it, right? Because AI is evolving differently if we're going to talk about retail or finance, right, than it is in healthcare. So, and I'm not as close to what's going on at the cutting edge in the other industries, right?
Yeah.
But I am in healthcare because I'm living that 5 days a week, right? I'm right in the thick of it, both within my role with BETA, as well as in my current role with Boston Scientific, because I'm smack dab in the healthcare industry, right? I live and breathe it.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing, and you asked me like big trends or things that I'm most excited about?
Yeah,
or
like what are you most
excited
excited about in the space? Like, are there big trends or specific technologies that you think are particularly intriguing?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, hey, so I like to say, short answer is generative AI. Exactly. Second answer is generative AI. And the third answer is generative AI. So, meaning like,
folks, that's all we need to do here. The answer is generative AI. Is it overhyped? Is it underhyped? Or is it exactly hyped? I am not sure.
Right. Yeah. So I kid it, because there's more to the AI trends and there's more to the technology than generative AI. But certainly, in some days, because of just the popularity of the topic and the media hype, that's all I'm talking about, like 99% of the time. But there's definitely, I like to begin my answer by saying there's more to AI as a technology and as a solution than generative AI. It is important, it's exciting, and everybody that's in the field like I am is super excited about it because of the potential. Yeah. But it's one part of a very large section and a technology portfolio that's been around in its modern form for over 20 years. So this is not new tech, and it has a lot to offer in addition to the exciting things that are being offered in the generative AI space. Traditional AI is excellent. And in fact, if you complement it with generative AI, you can solve some really awesome things and do some really cool things, right? Because number one, traditional AI is a lot more predictable. It's a lot more of follows a lot more of what I call a traditional software life cycle, and it's a lot more predictable by nature. By design, you can do great things with predictive analytics. You can do a lot of great things with classification. That is a lot more predictable than the current state of generative AI, which by its nature is not going to be as predictable, because it's what the technology is really good at is creation. Right? Creating new things, whether that's new content like new images or videos, or generating new insights. And so by its nature, it's going to be not as predictable, because that's what it's designed not to do, right? So anyway, there, I'd like to start that answer that way, saying like you have to look at what the whole technology portfolio around AI is about, and not just like overly index or overly focus on the generative portion.
Do you think there are any applications in generative AI and healthcare that you're particularly excited about right now? Anything specific that really, made you take a step back and say, wow, this is really impressive?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the ability to improve the interaction with patients and with physicians. I come from a healthcare family, so very, very much near and dear to my heart, like how we impact the delivery of clinical care. I have lots of doctors and nurses and pharmacy people like in my family, so I'm like, so it's a very I'm deeply vested in it because of it's something we discussed at the dinner table when I grew up. Healthcare, right? I grew up in that environment, so I always am sensitive to how anything, particularly a technology like AI, impacts those frontline physician leaders or clinical leaders, because that's literally like my family. Like I grew up in that. Like so, I'm like I come back home and like tell hey my mom's like, I remember the first day I told my mom like, so honey, what are you up to these days, Michael? I'm like, I'm working on artificial intelligence, and the reaction I got from my mom and my my family was like, oh wow, like. You could hear crickets. And so I was like, ooh,
Well, and then
like,
you have to do your job well, because if you don't, you're going to hear about it.
I'm going to hear about it.
They're going to come after you.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just my boss I'm worried about. That doesn't scare me. But my family definitely, something, it's this whole different level. But so, your question is like, what am I particularly excited about? It's so exciting because you look at things that, some big issues that have to be resolved in healthcare, like the fact that we're just not producing enough nurses, enough doctors to meet the demand, particularly in rural medicine, right? And so there has to be a new approach and a new way to solve for that, because the traditional way that we've approached it is like, let's crank out more nurses, crank out more doctors. Well, that is just not achievable. Like it's out of the picture. The demographics don't support it. So you can't depend upon like the schools, the institutions to produce the amount of clinicians to meet the demand. So what you have to look at other options. And one of the most exciting things now that we can see as potential is to make to allow that the technology allows us to do now with AI the way it is automation, right? Things we can automate the processes that have taken takes hours, even minutes count, right? When you're talking in a clinical environment. So help the existing practitioners be more efficient and better at their job, right?
Well, and I think a lot, my husband's family is very medical focused. So there's doctors, there's dentists, there's dental hygienists, nurses,
so you
sales.
know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
History,
and I know one of the things that is the biggest complaint is just the sheer amount of paperwork that has to be filled out on a regular basis. And so much of it is really redundant, or you just need to make one little change, but using the software, is slow. And so I imagine that's a big application for this. Yes.
Huge. And absolutely. Like one of the biggest projects I did, not Boston Scientific, but at Optum, was exactly that. Figuring out how we can take, documentation in the case of the project that I was working on is what's called an EOB statement, or explanation of benefits, which is
Yeah.
what you get, when as a statement to show, at the end of the year, your whatever health plan you're looking at is like, hey, what did I spend my money on, or what was getting paid, right?
Yeah.
So one of the biggest projects that I worked on was automation of that, exactly, and applying generative AI to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's a great way, and a great example of how the technology can be used to automate, kind of a process and make it even more effective, because when you tune the AI and use it with real data, you'll be surprised at the results. It's quite astounding.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And when so earlier you said that we're not getting enough doctors, we're not getting enough nurses who are coming into the space.
Absolutely.
And so trying to build AI tools and automation to help them do their jobs better and make it so that we're able to help more patients.
Absolutely.
What do you think is the biggest application that you have found that is most helpful
Sure.
to doctors and stuff in that space? Obviously, I talked about paperwork, which is a big pain.
Yeah, we just talked
pain
about
in the
that.
butt.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if there's anything else that
Sure.
really blew you away.
So there's a startup founder that was talking about, about AI and how their particular startup could enhance their product offering, right?
Yeah.
And their startup that was focused on mental health, which is very big deal, right? Here, talk about an environment where the current system, the current processes just aren't scaling well to meet the demand, because
Yeah.
it's no secret that we have a growing crisis around mental health, right?
Yes.
And just, again, not enough clinically trained physicians, psychiatrists, therapists to meet this massive demand. If you've ever tried to book an appointment with a therapist or psychiatrist, but it's like trying to find like time on anybody's schedule is very challenging, and like there's a lot. And so again, a realistic case where there's just too much demand. So what I told this founder was like let's look at the potential solutions. And like he's already explored the whole brick and mortar traditional, let's like work with clinical partners to come up with a better solution that can scale and thus make, open up the accessibility of mental health counseling to the masses, which is the vision of his startup, right?
Yeah.
But he told me, yeah, I tried that. It's just not workable, right? So so that's not workable. So let's explore another option, which is let's apply AI for that. Let's create a chatbot clinically trained that can offer those kinds of services and make it accessible, make it more accessible. At least if you can explore like ways to like even just like first point of contact and triaging, or answer some basic questions, with well-defined guardrails, well-defined grounding with a model. There are already some very good solutions that do that, right? And so so I was able to convince him and a couple of other representatives from the company that they should explore doing that. And he told me there's a lot of resistance to applying the technology in that sense, because naturally, the clinicians feel threatened. Like, what do you mean? You're taking business away from me, or you're replacing me. But that's not the case. Like, there's so much demand for your services that you yourself can't meet that. And so there's a lot of individuals that are going without the care that they need.
Yeah. So
you have to approach it from the angle, like, how much better can I expand my impact, right? Expand my reach as a clinician versus, taking my job or taking away my expertise, right? It's not.
Yeah.
You have to sort of flip the conversation to how can I expand the effectiveness of my practice?
how can we help the most amount of people
Exactly,
who
because
are
that's what
in need of help?
Exactly, because that's what you are trained to do. And I can say this with authority because I come from a medical family. They want to help people.
Yeah.
But you can't. There's only a certain amount of hours in the day, and there's you're constrained already with all these regulations. So you have to think about how can I enhance my impact.
Yeah.
And this technology allows you to do that.
And then you run into how is the implementation going? How do we make sure to implement this so that, the AI doesn't hallucinate something
Right.
unfortunate, right?
Of course, yeah. Hallucinations, right?
I saw a really
Yeah.
bad Google Gemini hallucination and decided not to post a video. I was going to post this week because of it.
Sure.
My friend sent me one. It's pretty bad.
Really? Yeah.
So Google Gemini just released their within the search, you can see new AI generated responses to questions.
Yeah.
So somebody had apparently typed into Google like, "I am depressed," and the top thing that came up was, "One editor suggests if you're depressed to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge." And it's like, there were probably a lot of Redditors, if you were using Reddit, to answer that question, who are going to make that suggestion.
Yeah.
And then right under that, in smaller letters, it said, "Oh, go see a therapist, talk to a friend, go for a walk," something like that. But how do we make sure that if we're going to build these tools, that we're building these tools so that they are safe, and so that they are most helpful?
Sure. Absolutely.
And also that there's something to me that when thinking about therapy in particular, thinking about mental health, wouldn't you want to talk to a person over a bot? But at the same time, if you need resources or you just have basic questions, I think those tools could be really interesting. So
that first point of contact.
What are the types of safety things that you think people need to be thinking about if they're building a startup that is building something like this, or if they're from a bigger company that is trying to build something like this?
Absolutely. First thing is the first thing you got to look at is the type of data that you have, right? So AI is heavily dependent upon data.
Yeah.
And specifically, because of the quality of data matters.
Yeah.
When you're looking at an enterprise, then the volume also you have to factor in, right? If you're going to expand your reach, and if you're going to handle more complicated types of questions, you need more data, right, to cover that. But you also you can't just have garbage and junk. Like in the Reddit example you gave, as a result of the bot doesn't know better because it literally consumed and digested data from Reddit, right?
Yeah.
So to it's like, hey, you gave me this, I have this, as logical. So number one, look at the quality. You need to look at the quality of the data, make sure that it, number one, is accurate, right? And the context is appropriate. Context, it's all about context. And then the other thing is that you want to make sure that the type of data sample that you're taking is also quantifiable and validated, so you don't have a lot of data bias, right? So because bias, we're all human, right? So we're using human generated information from the internet or from other data sources. So it's naturally going to be biased. So you have to account for that. So that's number one. Number two is once you get through that and you perfected your model and you've gone through the stage of what's called model validation.
Yeah.
Now you're going to bring the AI online and use it in front of your consumers. So that brings up the second stage, which is the monitoring, which we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge field right now. A lot of startups going into it. Very exciting, exciting work. And basically, that's the goal of that, is to monitor the AI's responses, making sure it doesn't get toxic over time, making sure that the quality and the validity of the responses are appropriate and accurate. Which is very important, especially from a regulatory standpoint. One of the things that I've learned now in my AI journey, particularly with enterprises, is from a regulatory standpoint, regulators they're concerned about the validity of your model, but they're more concerned about how you're monitoring that model.
Yeah.
So that the oversight is much more important from a regulatory standpoint than the model validation, right? So that's the second piece. That can help with the hallucinations, with the accuracy, with the biases.
And making sure people don't jump off of the Golden State
State Bridge. Making sure you don't get the responses like jumping off of the Golden Gate Bridge is a good thing, right?
Yeah, I saw that one this morning. I was like, oh boy, Google, you're in trouble.
Exactly. There's a lot of cases for that. Where adequate monitoring. Again, the monitoring is whatever you don't catch during the validation phase of the model, you should definitely catch in the monitoring phase of the model.
Yeah. So when AI leaders Sam Altman or the team at Anthropic or people at Microsoft, when they're talking about not understanding how these generative AI models are coming up to their conclusions, how do we try to monitor these models? And what's this kind of black hole that engineers are talking about when they say that they don't quite understand how AI is able to come up with specific conclusions?
Sure. So number one is it really depends upon the model and particular method that you're using, that the engineers and the data scientists are using to solve a particular use case, right?
Yeah.
So meaning like there's different degrees, and we discussed this earlier. There's the very, very large foundation models, right? Which had, billions and billions and billions upon parameters, right? So, and then you have the smaller models, which they can also have billions of parameters, but it's much more realistic to, if you're going to go with like fine tune that model, right? Because the number of parameters definitely matters. Like the higher you go, the harder it is to really understand the way the AI thinks, and because that's where the fine tuning methodology comes in place, where you're literally using data, identifying features in that data to change how the model thinks. Yeah. Like they call it like cognitive reasoning, right? The data scientists call it the general reasoning ability, which is, certain models, they're like Anthropic's Claude Opus model. They're all like, we have, they've done some testing and they're saying that this is the highest capacity to do that general reasoning. That's what's being referenced, and that's what data scientists and engineers are trying to change when you do what's called fine tuning.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the issue with that is the bigger the model, the more parameters, the harder it is to fine tune, the more data it takes to train it, the more inference it takes, right? So the cost quickly ratchets up and the amount of effort quickly ratchets up. So you want to avoid going to having to fine tune a model, no matter how big or how small, right?
Yeah. So
because the cost, number one, and the cost involved to do it, number one, you need a lot more data, a lot more expertise, but you also need, you just need a lot more processing power, the GPUs, right?
Yeah.
So which, makes NVIDIA super rich and a very popular stock to buy these days, because guess what? You need NVIDIA knows, like, the more popular the AI solutions becomes, the more popular that they're needed, right?
I know. I'm so mad I didn't jump on that game.
Exactly.
What? Oh, man. I can't win all of them.
You could be a full-time podcaster.
It would be so great.
Yeah. You and Dave could be living on the Lake Minnetonka right now, right? We could be podcasting on Lake Minnetonka or Maine.
Why aren't we podcasting on a yacht on Lake Minnetonka?
Exactly.
Honestly, these are the real questions we should be asking.
Let's think about that. We need to reframe this question in your next podcast should be like AI on the lake.
I guess the only other way that we could, make that our podcasting on a yacht on Lake Minnetonka happen is by getting sponsors. So if any sponsors would like to jump in and sponsor our show, Swift Start Go, we would love to hear from you. So chat with you soon.
There you go. I think AI on the lake has a nice ring to it. So
it really does.
You should be going for that.
I think that's the dream and it feels attainable. Let's go for it.
All right.
So I have another enterprise question for you, which is, what do you think enterprise executives, so the big hot shots, the head honchos, the CEOs, all that jazz, what do you think they are missing when it comes to generative AI?
Sure, great. I'm glad you asked that question because I am a principal enterprise architect, so it's
right.
It's my job, right? So in the broadest context, in the broadest sense, the thing that I recognize right away in the conversations around AI and generative AI is most executive leaders don't understand how heavily dependent AI is on data, and I say this because it is often over the attention and thus the resources and the conversations that get spent around AI versus data work is heavily slanted towards the generative AI and AI. And although you do need to bring in the technology, you need to bring in the language models, you need to bring in the platforms, you need to do the produce the new architecture around generative AI. You still have to have it, but the technology is so heavily reliant upon the type of data and the quality of data, like we mentioned before, heavily. Like you're not going to get the kind of results, and certainly not the accuracy that you need to resolve the issues around the use cases around generative AI, especially in the healthcare setting, because the healthcare data is very complicated, right? It's usually clinically based, or it's very complicated and full of jargon, and you need to have the experts both to understand the data as well as the ability to deliver the data and make it the quality that the language models need or the AI models need in order to produce accurate results, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I'm seeing now as a trend is a lot of executive leaders don't understand it, and so they are trying to shift too many resources towards the AI side and forgetting about they need to equally shift resources and investment on the data side, because eventually you're going to run into a ceiling especially when you try to scale a solution. Like I mentioned to you before when we were talking at an earlier part of the show, like if you're going to scale a solution, it's going to increase both the volume of data that you need as well as the quality of the data that you need. And so to do that well, you need to invest in those resources, which are built around data engineers, data scientists, data experts that understand the data. They're not always going to be the same people that are going to be the AI experts, but they are the data experts. And so that is a common challenge that I often encounter as an enterprise architect, is making sure that there is a balanced perspective around that. And that's an important thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And another question related to that is, I've been hearing a lot of whispers about about enterprise executives basically saying, I want AI, but not really actually understanding what that means.
Sure.
Or specifically looking as AI as a tool to get rid of employees. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, or how you would advise an enterprise team member or CEO when it comes to how to think about what are the big picture implementations or implications that AI can be to be helpful to executives and create opportunities for their businesses, essentially.
Sure. Well, the thing is, with AI right now, current state, it's in that assistant model, like a virtual assistant, right? So, which means that it's not independent on its own. It doesn't have like the ability yet to self-govern and to have like its own like motivations, right? So that, because it's designed to be an assistant to somebody, a human that does, right? Mm-hmm. So by virtue of that, like the current paradigm which AI operates in, it's an assistant. It literally makes you better at your task, at your goals, at your challenges. So you need that human connection, right? So which means that you can't like automate the people out of a process, right? Yeah. Like you're gonna need, in fact, what I'm seeing right now is the creation of new jobs like prompt engineer. Never has existed until the generative AI got really, really popular, right? So, end of 2022, 2023, like, you're seeing a lot of suddenly job descriptions around prompt engineers and AI delivery leads, AI product managers. So literally these jobs did not exist prior to, 2023. I didn't start seeing them, and now it's 2024. I'm seeing a lot of postings, both in my previous employer and current employer and other employers. So new jobs are being created around the AI, and that's important. I think that's an important trend, as well as you saw when I showed you my presentation, right? Like, you saw that, you immediately glommed upon that picture with that guy. It's like that human in the loop concept, right? Mm-hmm. You need that human, especially in the healthcare environment. They need to be there to make sure that the responses that the AI is giving is accurate and is appropriate. It's not, saying, yes, it's a good idea, to jump off the, Golden Gate Bridge if you're not feeling well, right? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So there's that aspect too, which is more on the monitoring and what's called AI governance. And for AI governance to work well, you need humans that understand the technology and understand the risks and the governance, the regulations. So what I'm seeing is just a lot of new jobs being created around AI to support it and to scale it.
Yeah, exciting. Yeah. Speaking of new jobs and new opportunities, let's talk about startup founders.
All right.
Now we get to the fun part.
My favorite topic. Yeah.
So, as chairman of the board at BETA, as somebody who's working at Boston Scientific in the AI space, in a point of leadership And I assume getting a lot of pitches from a lot of startup founders.
Every day. Every day.
I'm curious, what are the biggest mistakes that you are seeing founders making when trying to build an AI and when trying to pitch to somebody like you, especially in an enterprise role?
Right. The most common misconception that I'm hearing from founders, both like within Beta's accelerator program, which is awesome, like very, very awesome program, 4 months, non-dilutive, right? So it happens twice a year. In their, at the end of that program that they're pitching, they have their final pitch as part of the capstone. And also in my job with Boston Scientific, as different startups pitch to me, for, a solution, Mike, we can solve your problem. So, and then I go, well, let's talk about that. Like, what do you think, what is the problem you think I need to solve? So the common thread that I'm seeing is, right now is, from the startup realm, is they want to become my AI partner specifically to help fine tune models, right? And so, which is great. I think that is certainly a challenge. But the thing is, it's a bit ahead of its time, because once you train a model, any model, whether it's a LLM or it's a traditional AI model, you own it, right? And so it's owned by, literally, it is yours, which means now you're...
And by yours, you mean the company? Or
the company.
Okay, the company, so not the founder. So if they're pitching Boston Scientific owns it.
Yes, because what the founders are pitching now is the concept of a data studio, right? So they're saying, we have the tools to help you fine tune and basically customize your an LLM to suit your needs, which is a great challenge. It's definitely a challenge. But again, once you do that, the company owns it, right?
Yeah.
And so why I'm saying that is the case law is not to the point where a lot of legal counsels within companies are completely comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, it leads to that, what was it, the car company where somebody tricked the AI bot into selling them a car for $1?
For $1, that kind of things. Yeah.
And the court said, you have to give him the car for $1 because
your AI said
you
that.
own the AI. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Exactly. So the case law is not quite there yet, and the regulations around AI, especially generative AI, like GDPR coming from the EU, which is one of the leading authorities in this space, and a lot of countries, including the U.S., look towards the EU for regulatory changes because they're literally the pioneers in this area. It's high visibility, right? So you have to account for the time. It's going to just take time for the attorneys to figure it out and work it out with the regulators, so we can be in a more comfortable place. And we're just not there yet. So there's that aspect. The other aspect is that it's very, very expensive to fine tune a model. You need a lot of data. You need a lot of expertise, and that investment, and because of the time it takes to do it well, also adds to the cost. So it's the most expensive option, and you don't even really need to do it except right now some very exceptional use cases where you actually have to do the fine tuning, or you actually have to create like a custom model for the purposes. You can resolve. There are other technical tactics and solutions that allow you to achieve the outcomes that you need for the business without having to resort to fine tune. So in the end, when the founders come to me and start pitching, we can solve this problem for you, I'm like, that's great, but I don't need it right now. It's not a burning need. It's too expensive of an option.
It's a nice to have.
It's a nice to have versus, yes, come tell me how you're going to resolve this. So you need to solve current challenges, and that's just not one of the current challenges. In the future, yes, and definitely that's where I feel like the industry is moving towards, because ultimately, when the ultimate business value the companies are going to get from AI is those key insights. And to get those insights, you need to use your own proprietary data to get it. There's really no other way to do that well. And so, of course, in the end, long term, we're going to need to go to that. It's just that right now, it's not a pressing need.
Yeah. So are there any areas that you think founders should be seriously considering going into? Yeah.
One of that we already talked about. One of them is the monitoring.
Yeah.
Solving for that. Like lots of opportunities. There's lots of startups that I've talked to that are investing in it, that are creating new ways to monitor large language models, like we talked about, like using a common trend that I'm seeing right now, I think has a lot of potential, is using another AI model to monitor another AI model, which gets us, which I think it's showing some great results. And it also moves us closer in the maturity continuum to that using, the intelligent agent architecture, right? So where other AI models are talking to another AI model. So it helps in both fronts, both matures the architecture of the AI, as well as it's proving to be a very effective way to do the monitoring. There are other methods, but this is one that I'm seeing that's showing a lot of potential.
Yeah,
in the startup space. Yeah.
Are there any other areas that you think founders should be exploring, specifically in healthcare?
There's always, it's always amazing to see the application of the technology to solve some of the biggest challenges in healthcare. Because one of the things that AI does really well is process vast amounts of information quickly, right? And come up with some really cool insights that, so I think more investing in use cases like that, where we have vast reservoirs of clinically relevant data, super exciting. That gets us, and there's lots of different use cases for that. And it gets us to the point where we can deploy the AI in a clinical setting where it can do the most good. When because you want to get to the point where I go to visit my physician or nurse and I have AI helping them do their job and come up with a better care plan for whatever, healthcare issue that I'm challenged with. That's where you want to get the AI deployed. And to do that well, you need to be able to apply it in those kinds of clinically relevant use cases. And that's very exciting.
Yeah. And I think the biggest opportunity that I've been thinking about when it comes to AI in healthcare is wearables. Again, figuring out how to integrate some sort of, an iWatch, or I don't know that people are going to be wearing the Humane pins or not.
I like it. I like the Humane pins.
I
think you need to reach out to them for a sponsorship.
I should reach out to them for a sponsorship? Hey, Humane.
Yeah, absolutely. Humane. Plugging them.
Are wearables the future? Find out by sponsoring me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again,
but stuff like that where people are able to get way more data on themselves so that they're able to present it to their health care professionals in their lives and say, hey, look, I am noticing these data points. I feel like that is the most intriguing spot for me, but also research, definitely.
Yeah, imagine that. Now take it, to scale, right? You need clinically relevant and accurate data, and a great way is to collect, data from the individual, right? So let's collect the data from the individual, but let's use it in an ethical manner, right? Yeah. Let's use it in an ethical sense and not be using it, in ways that we shouldn't be using it, and the ways that the regulators aren't gonna, aren't gonna allow, right?
Keeping things private, making it so you are only sharing it with your healthcare professional and not necessarily the entire world.
Exactly.
Are there any data privacy things that you think people should be thinking about, whether it's founders or enterprise officials or maybe people in government when it comes to AI?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but I do talk to attorneys pretty much on a daily basis. So there's
corporate world.
You need to have and that's a good thing. You need to have appropriate level of governance, right?
Yeah.
And that's important. You need to make sure that you're abiding by all the proper laws, and that, you have trained individuals that are experts in it, so they're legally trained and not individuals that don't have the adequate amount of training or experience. So you need to have those individuals leading the governance and making sure that you're abiding by all the appropriate laws and regulations, particularly data privacy, but also in not just privacy, but also like could be state specific or country specific regulations. So there's the regulatory aspect, right, to it too, which is the attorneys tell me is a separate thing in and of itself.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Last 3 questions. You ready? First is, in one word, what are you most excited about when it comes to AI in healthcare?
One word. Personalization.
Nice. what is, again, another one word, what is the thing you are most worried about when it comes to AI in healthcare?
Jobs.
People losing jobs?
Just jobs as a whole. Change.
Yeah.
Could be a lot of things, right? But I think the impact on jobs is at the individual level. Yeah. Could be anything. Yeah.
And now we kind of said this earlier because you mentioned the things you're most excited about were generative AI.
Yeah.
But do you think generative AI is overhyped, underhyped, or, at the proper hype level, if that is something that exists in the world?
I would say it's at the appropriate level, but in some cases, in some days, it definitely goes over the overhype cycle.
Yeah.
But mostly, I think it's appropriate to where the technology is currently at.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've been thinking that generative AI is overhyped in the moment right now, but underhyped for what it could be in the future.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
The potential, we are just, which is what I'm super excited about this, and especially how it's, where I'm at in my career is, it really gives us the ability to do things that we have not been able to do. And so that's super exciting. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. There's so much newness and so many new applications of it. We are just at the beginning of the cycle, and that's super exciting to know that we're just at the early stage, but yet look at all the things that we've been able to do already that we haven't been able to. Super exciting.
Do you have any advice for anybody watching, especially anybody who's trying to get into the space, whether they are early career or mid-career?
Sure. I think first of all, it's important to get the education and training, and there's all types of great free resources now that are available around, learning about machine learning and traditional AI as well as generative AI. Take advantage of that because that's always a good cycle. Get a good foundation of that. Second piece is, there's all kinds of opportunities in different organizations, whether you're in a startup or a larger enterprise, to get some real world experience on projects that are working on AI. Mm-hmm. So in that way you can get, you can start to see it, beyond the hype, right? Really looking at what are the steps and processes, what are the challenges, what are the solutions it takes to actually implement AI, or in the case of a startup, develop a solution that can be used to, disrupt an industry, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we can wrap up there. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions for myself or for Michael, please write them down in the comments below, and maybe Michael can come back and answer them at some point.
Absolutely.
Or I'll maybe ask him directly and just write some replies for you guys. Michael, where can people follow you if they want to hear more from you?
I'm readily accessible and available on LinkedIn. Just look me up on my LinkedIn profile. Otherwise, come and visit me and talk to me. I'm very easy person to walk up to and talk to at one of our beta events. Twin City Startup Week is coming up in September, and so please come take the opportunity to come visit us at Twin City Startup Week, and hopefully see you there. Yeah, in September. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Michael, for having us. Thank you so much to the beta team for letting us storm into the office on a weekend. Exactly. And please join us again for next time. My name's Carolyn Holden. This is Swift Start Go. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.